Shabbat Shalom, everybody. The Parsha this week is Shoftim, and I've spent the entire week talking about how this Parsha that means judges, magistrates, officials, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha, you shall appoint for yourself judges and magistrates. I've spent the entire week talking to people in this community about how it's not actually about the legal system, it's about cheshbon hanefesh, it's about personal teshuvah in preparation of the high holidays. And now on Shabbos morning, I'm going to pivot and talk a little bit about the legal system and judges and lawyers. And in particular, I'd like to do it this morning because there is a great article in Jerusalem Post right now. The title of the article is that Israel's defender against the ICC, the International Criminal Court, speaks out after retirement. The article this week, as the Torah speaks to us about a legal system, the article is all about a gentleman by the name of Roy Schandorf, who was brought in to a position that did not exist. In the waning days of Prime Minister Olmert's term, a representative of the Israeli government, a representative of Daniel Friedman, who at that time was the justice minister for the state of Israel, pursued Roy Schandorf, who was in private practice, away from Israel at the time for a 7-year period. They came to him and they said that a new strategy had emerged against the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and that was that we were to be brought up as a people. Our state was to be brought up with our leaders, with charges of war crimes in the ICC. And the Jewish people needed, in fact, the best and brightest to stand and argue our case. Would he come back to Israel? This was a man with 7 years in the private sector, and before that, he had a position in the IDF's International Law Department. He was no stranger to what it would take to serve in this position, and he was no stranger to service for the Jewish people. And the only question was, had he done enough? Had he done enough to fulfill his personal obligation to his people? Had he done enough to fulfill his personal obligation to our national homeland? And thank goodness, his answer was to come back home and to assemble a legal team like Israel had never assembled before, with a budget that, according when he asked for 40 million shekels to go out and pursue attorneys all throughout the world that would come home with him, it was more than anybody expected, and the answer quickly came back, of course. He went around the world assembling a dream team, then stood in the ICC and defended our people against the Goldstone Commission and all kinds of accusations that have emerged over the last decade and a half. His story was never told. He never wanted a thank you. He never wanted books to be written about him, because he believed that at his core what he was doing was representing our people in a pursuit of justice, the same pursuit of justice the Torah talks about this week. A system that let us down 1,000 years ago when the Talmud was put on trial in Paris, France, in the 13th century. We stood before a court and argued our case, and we were found to be guilty, and Talmuds were burned all throughout Europe. A system that let us down almost 150 years ago in Paris, France, when an officer was put on trial by the name of Alfred Dreyfus. And it's because of Roy Schondorf and his team, and it's because of the state of Israel and our new status in the world that we could stand in that system and be confident that his team would not let us down this time. It seems as though the continent of Europe calls us into the courtroom again and again and again throughout history. But what the continent of Europe was not counting on was that a new generation of Jews have grown up, not afraid to stand before the world and say, we are right. Our people received this Torah and its rules about a legal system as we wandered in circles in the desert with flimsy homes built into the sand. Without concrete or cement, the Torah tells us the real foundation for our lives should be found in the law, where we shall all be judged equally. We should be allowed to argue our narrative before one another and know that justice will emerge. Now that, thank God, we have foundations for our homes, foundations for our institutions, and foundations for our state of Israel, how much sweeter it is to know that the legal system is still one in which we hold dear, we respect, and now we can stand as equals with our neighbors throughout the world. Parshat Shoftim begins on page 1088.